Hello everyone, and thank you for joining our live fireside chat on touchscreen kiosks, why you should care about them. Today we have Yeti CEO and co-founder Tony Scherba and Jibestream's VP Sales Dave Johnson here to talk about the power of kiosks. Yeti is a software design and development studio based in San Francisco, California, and specializes in all things kiosks. Jibestream is an indoor mapping and location platform provider that specializes in merging business data with indoor maps. Together, Jibestream and Yeti provide you with the tools to create smart indoor experiences that engage and delight customers. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to both Dave and Tony.
Hey, Tony, how you doing?
Hey, Dave. Doing good. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure, and thank you to everyone joining us today. For a little bit of background, I'm still relatively new here at Jibestream. I've been here about 4 months now. And to be honest with you, before I joined here, my thoughts around kiosks were kind of, the old sign you used to see by the elevator showing you where the rooms were. But thanks to you, Tony, you've really opened up my eyes about what these can be.
Yeah, and funny enough, I guess I've been working with Jibestream for longer than you have, Dave. My company has been working with Jibestream for, I think, almost over 2 years now, integrating maps in these different kiosks and things like that.
And I'm going to fire away with some questions. So this is one of the biggest ones for me when I started off. Can you describe what you mean by a large format touchscreen kiosk? Because this was foreign to me.
Yeah. And it's a little bit hard to describe. So we have a couple different names for them. We've heard them called mega tablets or smartphone on steroids. But essentially, they're large TVs that are usually like 30 to 50 inch that are touch enabled. Of course, have a digital display, and essentially they act as an application that people can walk up to and interface with. It can have all kinds of features, and we'll get into what some of those will be later on.
Sweet. So let's dive in. You mentioned the screen. What are some of the other background technologies that you use in creating these tablets on steroids?
Yeah, so they come with a couple different like standards. So there's usually there's like a TV that's running the application on it. Usually we prefer to do these in 4K so that the text looks really clear and bright. With 1080p, we've noticed that you'll get some pixelation and stuff like that. The TV usually has touch bars around it so that we can do capacitive touch on it, so it will act like a smartphone. And then there's a small computer that's running Windows or Chrome that is all locked down to handle kiosk mode only. So nobody will walk up to it and pull up a browser and do whatever they want in it. It's locked down, so it acts as a single serving application that is running there.
You may have made that comment as a joke, Tony, but we actually had some major issues up here with a kiosk not being locked down properly. Thankfully, it wasn't a Yeti or a Jibestream kiosk, but I can understand the pain there. Obviously, I know, but tell me about some of the cool stuff your team has built.
Yeah, definitely. So I think one of the best known and the most used ones that we've done was that we worked with Westfield Malls and we integrated with Jibestream with them, and we built large format touchscreen kiosks for many of the different malls that they have. Usually they're flagship malls. So some of the kiosks that we built with them are in the World Trade Center Mall in New York, in Century City in LA, the London Mall, and we're rolling out to a handful of other malls right now as well. But really it's kind of a premium experience. So usually we're putting it in the best locations, the newest locations. We've also worked with San Francisco City Hall and developed a touchscreen kiosk there in the historic building. So that's been pretty cool. And then in the more experimental realm of things, and this is where we'd actually, potentially build it on Android and do some custom integrations. Is that we've interfaced with exercise equipment so that people can walk up and play with do their exercises and be trained by a large format touchscreen, and they can interface with it and choose their workout regimens and all that fun stuff. And then we've done some experimental vending concepts with a large corporate client that we're not allowed to talk about.
I guess everyone would have to just Google that one, Tony. And I actually didn't realize, but I've used the kiosk at the World Trade Center. That is good. This was before my time at Jibestream, so I can actually comment and say it was gorgeous. But that's kind of what you've done now. Where do you see this evolving over time? How is the kiosk going to change?
Yeah, so we're having a lot of different conversations and doing a lot of different kiosk builds right now, and so what we're seeing is there's a large appetite for them, where people would have maybe created an app, but they're not seeing the downloads that they want or the usage that they want, and there's a with a touchscreen kiosk, people can just walk up to it. They don't need to have they don't need to download it, open it up, remember to open it up. If they want the information, they can just walk up to this touchscreen kiosk and interface with it. So we definitely see a lot of, we definitely see that evolving a lot in many different venues. So, hospitals with healthcare, we think is a huge place for that, and we're seeing a lot of interest there. In corporate offices, we're seeing a lot of, hey, which meeting rooms are open, like which floor do I go to if I'm doing this, helping visitors. And then, and then we've even been seeing some interesting use cases in, manufacturing. So monitoring and controlling different things on like a manufacturing floor. So, I think there's a lot of different things that are going on in there, and we've essentially been able to take smartphone technology and blow it up and make it big for specific use cases, which is really cool.
I can attest to that. If on that healthcare example, actually 2 weeks ago, I had to take my dad to the hospital. Wasn't my local hospital, so I didn't have an app, didn't realize there was one. I used the kiosk to find out where to go for the labs and such. So what would you say the primary business cases for the kiosk, for a touchscreen kiosk are?
Yeah, well, so to specifically speak to the location awareness and the wayfinding aspect of it, what we've seen is, in a lot of times in public venues, there's people that walk into them, and even if there is maybe there's some signage, people get confused by that, and they're asking security guards, or in the case of a hospital, asking nurses and doctors like where rooms are, where different departments are, all of those things. And so that kind of one cuts down on productivity of in the case of hospitals, nurses and doctors, and it also is just it's confusing for the users. So definitely from a wayfinding perspective, one of the use cases is just showing people where to go. I think that to expand onto some other use cases, there is a way to bring in outside information and location aware events and things like that. We mentioned digital signage. There's with these, these are typically like 44-inch large format touchscreens. There's a lot of real estate there to advertise events, or advertise warnings or corporate initiatives, et cetera, et cetera.
Sweet. You really can do anything with it.
So I'm gonna flip it around here, Dave. Since you're the expert in the mapping, what can a map in a kiosk power?
So pretty much all of those use cases that you were talking about. So whether we're looking at kind of the simple one, wayfinding, you need to show someone where to go. You need a map to do, you want a map to go do that. Asset location, room booking, understanding when you walk in to an office building, when you walk onto the floor, being able to see what meeting rooms are booked and which aren't, so you don't accidentally get kicked out. Understanding where in the physical location the assets actually are, whether you're looking for wheelchairs in a hospital, luggage carts at a hotel, down to equipment and machinery on the factory floor. So we can literally power pretty much every single use case you described. So we know we can do all these fancy things, but where most people really get interested, from my experience, is what is the process actually going to look like? What should I expect on that build side?
Yeah, so as we've talked about, there's a lot of different things you can do with these touchscreen kiosks. So really what we have to do is we have to figure out, which use cases apply to the particular business that we're working with. We need to set out a roadmap. Okay, when are we going to install this thing? When does it need to go in? Figure out all the different features that we need to put into it. And then one of the major things is we have to figure out the different integrations that we're going to do. So how are we going to tie into perhaps something in a corporate sense? How are we going to tie into like Office 360 to get room bookings, things like that? So my company has built kind of a basic kiosk platform, and then what we'll do with our clients is we'll add different components on top of that, depending on the different use cases that they have. So there's from a build process perspective, it's mapping all of that out, getting it built, and then working on the integrations, and then actually fabricating and putting the kiosks in, which I think we'll talk about a little bit later as well.
No, it sounds good. And, my original thought was, okay, so first I buy the screen and then I go to a web page and everything works. It's a lot more involved. And that's why you want to work with a professional. But
Yeah.
I am mapping, so I have to ask you, what are my options for maps?
Yeah. So, as much as we love Jibestream, we haven't been able to integrate with Jibestream on every single thing that we've done. And so there's a number of options out there for mapping. And we have we've interfaced with a couple of different things, and it all comes down to different fidelity that you've been able to that you have. And so we've just pulled architectural maps and put them into kiosks. There isn't that's not great. What we've observed when we have done that is people walk up and they look at it and it's very confusing. There's kind of a lot going on, and it's impossible to do wayfinding with. So people, so that's definitely really difficult. We also integrated with a different mapping provider that just put a layer on top of Google Maps, and we weren't able again to really get accurate wayfinding. It was sending people like through rooms that didn't have doors in them, or like where doors weren't. So some major difficulties there. But integrating with Jibestream has been very easy for our developers. And the robust feature set and wayfinding components are amazing just from a usability perspective.
Well, thank you.
Hey, we love you guys.
But
So we just talked about mapping, Dave. Why does a kiosk need a map anyway?
so I could give you the smart aleck answer and say for every reason you just laid out, Tony, but really it is one of the big reasons people are going to that kiosk is to gain familiarity with the indoor space. Nothing is better at doing that than a map. It's going to visualize all that data. An accurate map is going to guide them to where they need to go. You know, at City Hall, they want to get their marriage license. They need to know where to go. Uh, and from a business perspective, you know, if you don't have a map there, they're still going to come and ask you where to go. They're still going to ask you where to get that information. So it is kind of core that if you're going to go do a kiosk, it needs to have a map. My preference is it has a Jibestream map. So you mentioned one of these earlier, but what are some of the other gotchas you've seen in development when you're rolling out these giant kiosks? Or sorry,
Yeah.
gorgeous kiosks.
Yeah. So, one of the biggest things that we've run into, and we try to address this really early, in the build process, is working with IT. You don't want to roll in there last minute with a big, touchscreen kiosk, bolt it to the floor, and then and then tell IT, hey, you got to deal with this. That's not how you make friends. So we oftentimes, want to make sure that we can put it behind firewalls, get it configured to the Wi-Fi, all those fun things. Uh, the other major gotcha, I would say, is involving the proper stakeholders. Unlike with an app where you can launch it to the App Store and it'll be on people's phones and maybe some people won't see it. With a kiosk, you're going to roll this in and it's going to be very public. People are going to interface with it, and so you don't want to you know surprise the CEO with a kiosk here, and he goes, hey, what's that? So getting the right people involved really early on is very important.
Yeah, I've seen that kiosk for San Francisco City Hall. And without making your head swell too big, Tony, it is gorgeous. San Francisco City Hall, for anyone who doesn't know, is this beautiful historic city hall. It's marble, looks like a mini version of the Capitol building. And putting a 40-inch touchscreen in that building would not fit with the vibe, so to speak. Tell me about what you had to go through on that one.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, there's marble, and so as they talk about it, within City Hall, it's the historic marble floors. It's never just marble. So, putting screw holes in there is something that really has to be gone through, like looked at and gone through the historical society and all of that stuff. So getting people like that involved early and bought into the process is really, really important. And then what we did with the kiosks, so that it's not just rolling in something that looks foreign and weird and doesn't fit the environment, is we worked with the San Francisco City Hall carpenter. I didn't know that we had a carpenter here in San Francisco, but we do.
Why your taxes are so high.
Yeah, exactly. And we built a really beautiful enclosure that matches all of the wood and trimming around the building, so that this thing looks and feels native to the building, and isn't something that's just that looks out of place and feels weird.
Okay. Now, speaking of, so we know it fits into the environment, but at Jibestream, we spend a lot of time working with healthcare providers, the government, and accessibility is huge. How do you deal with accessibility on that kiosk?
Definitely. So we've done this a number of times. And with these large format touchscreens, somebody in a wheelchair is going to have a really hard time accessing, something at the top of the touchscreen. So what we've developed and what is built into our kind of core kiosk technology is a accessibility button. So someone can wheel up to it and hit the accessibility button, and it will shift down. Everything that you can touch and manipulate on the screen will shift down, so that somebody in a wheelchair or or a young person, a small child, can access everything in there. Additional considerations outside of the software is that we had to make sure that we didn't put feet for the kiosk holding it up um, in front of the screen, because that would make it very difficult for somebody to roll up and interact with. So a lot of different considerations there, but we've made sure that we're full ADA compliant on the kiosks that we roll out. The other thing that stems into accessibility is also languages. The city of San Francisco has a language ordinance where all signage needs to be in 5 different languages. So we put in call it localization, but it's all in the same spot. A different a language module, so that people could go in and choose a language, and it would show all of the signage in all of that different language. If you're doing that in all those different languages, if you're doing that physically, and making signs in each one in 5 different languages for every single thing around an entire facility, that your whole building would just be signage, which is a major issue. And then Jibestream is really good about this too. They have language modules where we're able to plug directly into that, and the maps will change and have the correct language in them as well.
Oh, you took my line, Tony. I was going to talk about everything we did on there, but I guess it's time for me to get some more questions now.
Yeah. So I've got now it's your turn. So, do you need a special type of map for a kiosk, Dave?
My personal preference is that you have a good map, preferably a Jibestream map, but actually the real benefit of Jibestream is the same map that's in the kiosk can be the one on your website, that can be for back of house, for doing things like asset tracking, and is the same one in your app. That way you can have a unified experience, whether somebody is coming up to the kiosk for the first time or looking at your space before they get to it, or always on the app as well. So no, you don't need a special map when you're working with Jibestream.
Awesome. And yeah, we've explored a number of different things with you guys as well, where you could tap on a kiosk, you could scan a QR code or tap your phone and be able to pull up the wayfinding directions from the kiosk onto your phone. So that's pretty cool too.
I played with one a couple weeks ago, and not only did it have the QR code, it actually printed the directions as well. That's perfect for a hospital, because going back to that that real experience I had with my dad, he's never going to install an app. He has a flip phone.
Yeah, that's another really good point on the accessibility front is, sometimes people don't have smartphones, and for them to be able to access some of this information, having a large format touchscreen allows them to access it. Or people that just don't understand how to download apps, it's very intuitive to have a large format touchscreen there to help them out. But anyway, so Dave, how do I and how much time does it take to manage mapping for a kiosk?
So, Tony, as I talked about earlier, when you're using Jibestream, there isn't any additional time to manage the map for the kiosk. Any update that you make in the Jibestream CMS, when you click publish, would automatically push out, to the kiosk, to the app, to the website, to wherever that map is being used. That way you're not wasting resources. And you may want that map in the kiosk to look different, obviously, than what your security team might be using. That's why Jibestream leverages the map profile feature, so you don't need to have separate maps for everything. One map, just use different ways.
Awesome. So we've been spending a bunch of time talking about kiosks and how awesome they are. And I know a lot of people on this call have a indoor location strategy. So how do the kiosks fit into an overall indoor location strategy?
So from my experience in talking with dozens upon dozens of clients and prospects, it's one of the core tenets. You talked about it earlier, Tony, and we mentioned it. Not everyone is going to install an app. Not everyone knows that, hey, I'm going to be stopping off at the mall, the hotel, the hospital, the office before they get there. It makes that indoor space addressable. It makes sure that somebody coming in is seeing where they need to be, what they need right away. So having that kiosk, for lack of a better term, it's almost like a gateway drug into the app. Somebody gets familiar with the process. They get that QR code that tells them to go download the app. Or the next time they come, because that kiosk experience is so much like an app experience now, it's bringing them in and getting them to download it. But what we would like to offer everyone here who's joined us today is the opportunity to help build that project with you and doing a roadmap session with Yeti and Jibestream. What you can do is schedule that free discovery workshop with us. What you'll leave with at the end of that session is the roadmap you need to bring those touchscreen kiosks into your indoor location and into your life. But Tony, thank you again. It's been a fun talk, and I'll pass it back to Jody.
Thank you again, Dave and Tony, for this very informational session. We hope everyone enjoyed it, and we hope you join us in the future for our next webinar series. Thank you very much.